one of the excuses given for the war was the Azov battalions, and the problem with the existence of Nazis or Nazi groups within Eastern Ukraine. Country with a Jewish president.
Exactly. Cannot be, more understated there. But that's the scenario. That's the storyline. And unfortunately for people like Scott Horton, got on your show and saying basically the same thing. Another interesting one, though, was when he was debating Bill Kristol. All right, the neocon, not a fan of Bill Kristol. Absolutely. When you're talking about the U.S. invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, again, I agree with all of the arguments that he's putting forward there. I agree with his arguments against Bill Kristol. But we're now talking about a Russian invasion of Ukraine. So here's an interesting thing that I noticed. Sorry to single out Scott, but here it is. During the debate that he had with Bill Kristol, he'd say something like this. He'd say, you have to either acknowledge that someone like Hitler was an exception to the rule or he was the rule. I claim he's the exception. So as Scott I would agree with this, rightly pose, I'm not going to go and call all of my political foes Hitler, which he would always, and I've followed Scott for a long time, okay? He would always have a problem with any sort of politician, regardless of who it was, all right? Some Speaker of the House or whoever, getting up there. We're talking about Saddam, Ahmadinejad, Gaddafi, anybody in the Middle East, all right? You're going to find some American politicians who are going to call them Hitler-like or even Stalin-like. But Hitler-like is obviously the one that's going to trigger, right? That's the Nazi comparison. So he said in his debate with Bill Kristol, that's either the exception or it's not. I think it's the exception. We should not just go along. And this is following the libertarian line, which is supposed to be anti-woke, not calling people Nazis, all right? We shouldn't just call people Hitler. We shouldn't just call people Nazis. It's sort of a tremendous lack of self-awareness. I don't think he realized that later on in the debate, there was a question about Ukraine. He proceeded to call a huge faction of Ukrainians Nazis because of the Azov battalion, because of what he thought happened in Maidan, which we can talk about. He's done that multiple times, not just in that debate, which was just so stark, because in the same debate, he can say, we're not supposed to call people Hitler. By the way, Ukrainians are Nazis. And on your show, he's calling Ukrainians Nazis. The Azov battalion, we don't have to go through this, but let's just, again, let's straw man it, or I don't know if steel man is straw man in this example, but yeah, I guess it's a steel man. Let's say that the entire country of Ukraine is actually Nazis, all 40 million of them, all right? Even Zelensky, the Jewish president. Okay, let's not say that it's that's 1,000 strong regiment in the far east of Ukraine, which is around this Sea of Azov, which for whatever reason, I don't know, they had some Nazi-like affinities there. Let's not assume that it's the one person that was elected to parliament post-Maidan in 2014. There hasn't been any political faction represented by Azov or any of these sort of fringe groups at all in Ukraine since then. Let's not assume it was only those small things. Let's assume it was the whole country of Ukraine that was Nazis, card-carrying Nazis. And I thought it, by the way, I'm just sorry to do these little sidebars, but I thought it was so funny on this show that he's sitting there and saying, like, these Nazis in Charlottesville, with the tattoos sitting in prison, they're not real Nazis. I know what real Nazis are. These are the ones in Ukraine.
What is a real Nazi now in the modern context?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him that.
Because that's actually an interesting point. Is it a Nazi sympathizer? Is it somebody who hates the Jewish? Is it somebody who's trying to, I don't know, wants to kill people? Like what is it? When you say someone's a Nazi now,
Ahmadinejad said he wanted to what?
You got just fascist beliefs?
Yeah, I think this was a bad translation of Ahmadinejad. I by no means would try to defend him in any means, but I believe he said, let's wipe Israel off the face of the map. That might have been a bad translation, but let's just say someone who wants to wipe Israel off the face of the map, hates Jews, wants to kill Jews, whatever. Let's presume that Ukraine, a country of 40 million people, which has much stronger and longer Catholic, from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which we're going to get into, Catholic roots than they do even Eastern Orthodox roots, which is more of an anti-Semitic branch of the Catholic Christian Church, the Eastern Orthodox branch of the of Christianity, which basically just lives on in Russia now. Let's presume that the whole country is Nazis. All right. Do we still justify Vladimir Putin moving the tanks in on February 24th, raping, killing, mutilating girls, families? I mean, these pictures, like, it just, the absolute lack of self-awareness, the hypocrisy. And again, we're supposed to be the anti-woke. Don't get too, carried up in a little bit of the craziness was happening in the US in 2020, 2021. But you just forget all that for Eastern Europe. You forgot it. It's a different place to you. It's something that only exists in your mind. They're just a bunch of Nazis. So I don't know if I explained the complete hypocrisy and lack of self-awareness that I see there, but that's what I see. I see everything we've been saying. You need to defend a country that is being invaded.
Is it not important, though, at that point to kind of separate the groups of people who are supporting Ukraine or against supporting Ukraine? Because it feels to me it seems to just become part of the US culture war. Because it seems to me if you're a Democrat, you might have a Ukraine flag in your profile, a bit of a virtue signal. But at the same time, the Democrats do want to send money out to support Zelensky and want to support their military efforts. Yeah. And it seems to be the more from a Republican libertarian side that's critical of this, as saying we shouldn't be interfering, we don't want to get involved. They want to bring up history of like corruption in Ukraine, or they want to bring up reasons to not align with the decisions that the Democrat Party is maybe making. Is it just down to a culture war?
I reject the premise.
Okay.
Right? It's down to moving more boldly ever against evil in the world, as Macy said. I mean, we're talking about Western liberal democracies, and we're talking about a kleptocratic dictator who is never democratic, Vladimir Putin, and we'll get to him in a second. But it is about being ever more boldly against the evil, going ever more boldly against evil in the world. That's what it's about. So, 20 years ago, it was the baby Bush and the neocons that were supporting these types of things, like arming nations that are suffering from dictatorial regimes. And it's a tough one it's just a tough one to go back and forth on that, because I do absolutely believe political football is always being played by not only countries that the United States might want influence over or even resources over. I mean, let's just not forget about what's happening with the petrodollar the last 50 years. When we talk about money and inflation, we can get into those things. But, this is the world that we live in 2022. Okay, there's political football. There are things that, 1 year might seem like the Republicans are in favor for. It's pretty sad that 20 years, like it's only 20 years later, it's only Democrats that are in favor for. I can't give you an answer for that. But again, I can tell you we're not 1,000 years from now where we're in our utopian, libertarian, classical, liberal, anarcho-capitalist paradise, where we all have private property, sufficient ammunition to defend our own private property, private insurance, private money, all the rest. We are just not there. So again, the choice is crystal clear for us. You're going to forget Ukraine, just like the Balts were forgotten in post-World War II era, or we don't. And I absolutely am in favor of not doing that. I can talk about ways to do that, Bitcoin donations, all the rest, but that's a little bit later.
But there is a lot of support. So the lens people see it may be very different from where they are. There may be, say, out in America, there may be different factions, groups of people, again, might be a political football, but have different opinions about Ukraine and whether it should be supported. Here in the UK, it's universal support.
Yeah.
There is no half of the country is saying we shouldn't be involved. There's universal support. Yeah. The government have been very supportive of it. The opposition party have been very supportive of our government supporting Ukraine. We've been very supportive of bringing people in from Ukraine. I mean, that's another sad thing. When you mentioned everything happened, didn't actually mention the separation of families. So a lot of families come to live here, but it's the mom, the grandma, the children. There's no dads coming. There's no brothers. There's no uncles. It's all. I mean, we put a family up in Birmingham. Somebody I was with yesterday has got a family they've put up here. There's a lot of people coming over. It's almost universal support here. Have you got that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, universal might be too strong, but it's the vast majority.
Yeah. It isn't it isn't part of a culture war. It is a sovereign nation's been invaded, cities are being destroyed, people are being murdered. How do we help them?
Yeah, and that's I think as well an interesting illustrative aspect of the difference between Americans and Brits. And if we're talking about the culture war and
let's say Europe.
Europe. Let's say Europe, actually. And if we want to take it further with the culture war and whatnot, I mean, if we want to talk about the philosophy that I like reading, Austrian, libertarian, anarcho-capitalist philosophy, whatever, I mean, it's just interesting that a lot of those people are centered in Texas. So you got the Texas libertarians that really, really care about these things. And they're just like, okay, non-intervention, let's build up our own war chest. Again, things that I understand, but, you know, not to belabor the point, like we are talking about sovereignty of an independent nation in a society where we said never again. We said never again after World War II. So that's the important point there. And then as well, I think another reason why Britain is so forceful on this is because you have a historical precedent of trying to keep the peace in Europe. I mean, the UK declared war on Nazi Germany on September 1st, 1939, when the Nazis rolled in the tanks. It was a bright, beautiful, sunny day in Berlin. No German had a clue that what was happening on, you know, in Poland, which fell in a month from Nazi Germany after it was carved up between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. Balts followed in 1940. Britain was the only country from the beginning of World War II until the end to stay with Poland. They had their alliances. They said, "Look, we're not going to stay, and we're going to declare war on you." And unfortunate for Poland and all of the Iron Curtain, the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Hungarians, Bulgarians, Romanians, we all fell behind this Iron Curtain, which was the peace that was made, unfortunately, after World War II. You know, the big powers just making the agreements to, you know, this is going to be the post-World War order. And that's a bit sad. I think that, you know, again, I don't want to rewrite history. And Scott was trying to do that with World War I, which again, I thought was very inappropriate because I just can't see how, let's say, Woodrow Wilson, his existence as a man is going to stop Adolf Hitler. It's going to stop Joseph Stalin. It's going to stop Lenin. All of these just boorish idiots in Moscow from taking on these horrible ideas of Marx. You're going to say that all of that was from, you know, Woodrow Wilson. I mean, that didn't stop the building of the Kiel Canal before World War I. That didn't stop all sorts of just horrible things that were happening. Also, the nationalist movements from countries that were trying to become independent after World War I.